Hello everybody and welcome to the latest Sopra Banking Software webinar. My name is Will Kitson, Head of Content and Research at Sopra Banking Software, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Christine van Meurs from Enigma Consulting, a fantastic partner of ours who specializes in payments. Christine is a managing consultant with a wealth of experience in implementation of instant payments, working with, among others, NAB and Triodos Bank. In this webinar, Christine is going to walk us through the current state of instant payments, the benefits banks can gain from instant payments, and how it can be implemented. We'll also be joined by Roderick Krohn, Executive Consultant from Enigma, who will share with you his insights on the future of banking and banking as a service, and Patrick Nerwert, Business Consultant from Sopra Banking Software, who will talk about the implementation of instant payments in a mutualized setup. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session where all our speakers, plus Laurent Huppé, Payments Business Line Director at Sopra Banking Software, will answer some of your questions. You can use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to ask questions during the webinar. So without further ado, let's hand over to Christine, who's going to get us started. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Will. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. Instant payments has quite some attention these days, and I expect a further acceleration by the COVID virus, and because of that, the averseness towards cash and physical card use. Instant payments is really the enabler for new solutions. Therefore, instant payments are getting more a strategic solution instead of a tactical solution, and instant payment is becoming the new normal, especially in the Netherlands, and clients expect the bank to offer this. So if we now move on to the next slide, and before I start to explain the why, the how, and challenges banks and corporates are dealing with when moving to instant payments, first a brief summary of what we mean by instant payments or real-time payments or immediate payments. So the main characteristic is the fastness, the speed of processing, and the irrevocability of instant payments. So pending the scheme that's being used, this can be between 1 and 10 seconds. But in general, you already see that most instant payments are processed within 0 to 2 seconds. The other feature is the amount limit and the differentiation between the schemes that are being used and offering instant payments. So if you look, for example, in the Netherlands, there is no amount limit. But if you look at the European version of instant payments, there is an amount limit of 15,000 euros. Which is going to be enhanced as of 1st of July to 100,000 euros. So the processing is on a 24x7, 365 basis, which is the whole year, day and night and weekends, which is completely different from what we're used to right now. And there's also a possibility for the confirmation to the payer that the money arrived and the beneficiary has received it and can start using it. Obviously, the offering of instant payments is for both consumers and businesses, and pending the bank that is offering instant payments, there are some sweets or extras to it, some value-added services. On the next slide, you see an overview of the numbers in relation to the gyro-based transactions. This is for the Netherlands and for Europe. In the diagram on the left side, it shows the total number of gyro-based payments in the Netherlands, of which 1.8 billion is for SEPA credit transfer. If you then look at the figures in the middle, and 2019 figures, so you see a split between non-instant, so the regular, the formal credit transfers, the batch credit transfers, and the instant credit transfers. And as of Q2 last year, when the bank started to use instant payments, you saw a move to 19% of all the credit transfers transactions being instant. If we then look at the right-hand side, the 2020 figures, and actually looking back at the last year, you see that there was already a big growth, moving from 18% to 40% at the moment of being instant payments of all the credit transfers. And if you look at the time between the Q2 2019 last year and May this year, you see that about 350 million instant payments were processed in the Netherlands. In Europe, though, the volume is still rather low, but 6% of all credit transfers are instant. But still in the Netherlands, there's also a growth to be made. And that has mainly to do that not all banks participate in instant payments yet. In addition, also some of the reachable banks have not moved certain areas of their business to instant payments yet. For example, some banks just offer it via mobile banking and not yet via internet banking. And some have not moved their planned and periodical payments to instant payments. And last but not least, the bulk payments have not moved to instant yet. The planning was to do this somewhere this year, but priorities have changed a little bit, and it's not clear yet when the banks in the Netherlands are going to do that. If we then move back to Europe, so where there's only 6% of the transactions being instant, only about 56% of the European banks are reachable, and there are still some 1,000 banks who have to move to instant payments. My idea is that those 1,000 banks are mainly the savings banks and the investment banks. But the expectation is that the volume will increase in the next year, especially when as of 1st of July, the amount limits will change from 15K to 100K. And so it will be more interesting for businesses to join the instant payment scheme and to start sending instant payments as such. So we move to the next slide and look at the main benefits. So the faster movement of funds is getting more important, but also the use of cards and cash is a thing at the moment due to the COVID virus. So companies with tight cash flows are very vulnerable, and instant payments can help them with that. So the situation now is really a catalyst for change. The speed of settlement is usually needed in a time like this, and cards and batch processes cannot do that instantly like instant payments can. So it helps consumers, businesses, and also banks to minimize working capital needs and be more in control. So I will choose a few examples of the below pictures to point out the benefits. So the main benefit is obviously the speed of processing and the ability to use that money day and night, also during weekends. So that is really on top of everything if you talk about benefits. The higher efficiency of billing is another one, and the example of a request to pay is one of those things which comes with instant payments. I will on the next slide I'll tell you more about that. But before going there, first some other benefits. The lower transaction cost is also very interesting, especially both for banks but also for corporates. Cards and cash are much more expensive than the use of instant gyro-based payments. And if we look at the bottom of the spider, you see more corporates operate in that real-time space, and it creates more possibilities for speed in the whole value chain of businesses. And so increases productivity, the liquidity management, settlements, delivery, credit limits. It's a push towards real-time online delivery and support of the whole value chain. If we then move to the next slide, you see a number of use cases mentioned here, of which you will probably recognize a few. I'm not going into detail on all of them, but we'll pick out 2 example use cases. We are involved in various discussions with savings banks, and for them it is not always obvious what the advantages of instant payments. A very good example of a use case that supports the business case for them is that their customers will now expect, after going live with instant payments and using it with other banks, and mostly current accounts, that when they make an expensive purchase, for example, a car or a holiday home, that they can pay from their savings or investment account directly and do the buy instantly, today, now. For example, you buy a car at a dealer in the weekend on Saturday, you want the car to be delivered. The dealer obviously would like to have his money before he hands over the car to this specific person. And the dealer receives his money instantly. And also the customer who's buying the car can pay at the latest moment, so he's sure that he gets the car before he's paid. So there's really an advantage for both parties, and something which those clients are looking for. But the challenge is really to find a profitable use case, and that is mostly found when something's built on top of that instant payment or vice versa. So it's really an enabler of new solutions. So one of those enablers of solutions is this request to pay I was referring to on the previous slide. Also, in a number of countries, like in the Netherlands, this is already being used, the so-called betaalverzoek. And it's also being worked on European-wide for a real European solution. But it's mainly used as an umbrella term for various alternatives in which the payee takes the initiative to request a specific payment from the payer. It is a solution for the challenges that corporates have, as they only receive funds when the customer is willing to pay or is going to pay them, and only receives information that the payer chooses to provide. So this makes reconciliation really sometimes a challenge and can negatively impact the cash flow. And this is then solved with request to pay. There's obviously also a benefit for the customer, who the payer of the request to pay, as they can choose the moment they pay and funds are not just debited from their account. So what is really becoming obvious is that clients, private and business, expect payments to be processed instantly. It's becoming the new normal, also from and to their savings and investment accounts. You need to have it to remain relevant in the future. So if we then move to the next slide, we're talking about the lessons learned and what is the impact on your organization and what do you need to consider when building an instant payment solution. You really need to look at the full value chain of your payments business, from front end to back end, including the links with the external parties and the whole end-to-end process. Also the inclusion of other banks, CSMs, or other parties who deliver services for you or to you in this respect. So if I've split up the areas in a front office, CSM and liquidity management, and a mid and a back office. And in the next slide, I will go through that and give you some examples of what you need to look at to ensure you deliver a solution which fits your client's needs. So if you move to the next slide and start talking about the front end, the front office. So where it all starts is the moment the client is initiating the payment. And the question is, from which channels are you going to offer this? Just from your mobile banking or also from your internet banking solutions? Then how are you going to deal with this, for example, the unhappy flow, the rejects and returns? How are you going to show them to your clients? Through push messages, or are you going to list them with a list with rejected payments? So also when another bank is not available for instant payments, then how are you going to show that to your client? Can he automatically choose for a regular instant payments, or is the client not able to initiate a payment and therefore not an instant payment? So also on the alerting part, there is something you need to look at. Will clients be alerted that an instant payment came on their account, or was there a rejection of an outgoing instant payment? Can clients choose for it? And last, also a very important thing is which accounts are in scope. Is it just the current account, or is it also the payment and investment accounts? So that's something you need to look at. But looking at your clients, you need to also know what kind of payments they are doing. Is it just in the Netherlands, and is it enough to support the Dutch scheme? But even in the Dutch scheme, you have some options on what are you going to offer to your clients. Are you going to offer them the so-called not time critical or the time critical ones? Whereby the not time criticals can take another 72 hours before they are processed. But yeah, that's something you have to choose. Is it for the initiating or also for the receiving part? What are you going to choose? But some of your clients might also do some quite a few of European payments. So then it might be worthwhile to also or only offer the European scheme. So that's something you need to look at and define and be very clear on what your client needs are. So that is the front end part of it. If we now move to the next slide. So pending your proposition, which you see at the bottom, is to your clients, you choose the scheme that fits the proposition. And then on that basis, you choose the CSM. So if you just operate in the Netherlands, you obviously choose for Equens Worldline in this respect. But if you operate European-wide, so then there's a few more options. And is this something which you're going to link directly to the clearing through TIPS or to RT1, who is offering this service? Or are you going to do this through your own CSM, through your national CSM? So that's something you need to keep an eye on and look at and determine what you need to do. But one of the biggest challenges really with the liquidity management part, because obviously when you move to an instant solution, this is also available in the weekends and in the evenings and on target closing times. So at those moments, you need to determine how you're going to ensure that there's enough money on account so that you can support instant payments for your clients. So it is quite difficult to predict how your instant payment stream is going to run in this period. So you need to determine how you're going to support that. In the Netherlands, for example, you have a so-called emergency procedure. So in case you have not enough money on the account to do the instant payments, initiate the instant payments, so then you can make use of this so-called emergency procedure. There is a fine related to it, but at least you're sure you can start to continue supporting and delivering instant payments to the clients of your clients. So that is something which is offered in the Netherlands, but that's not offered in Europe. So you need to have a clear picture on how you're going to do the liquidity management during weekends and in the evenings. Another issue is also the reconciliation. And the question is, how are you going to do this in the weekend? Or are you going to wait until Monday? How important is it for you to do this constantly, or can it wait? So those are the things which you need to have a close look at when you start looking at the CSM, the liquidity management questions you have when implementing instant payments. If we then move to the next slide, to the mid and the back office, I think this part is the most challenging, as the readiness of your mid office and back office is really critical in this respect, especially both operationally and IT-wise. So how far are you going in respect of support of instant payments in your organization? So is your client services going to do this 24/7, 365? Is your IT going to do this? Is the administration be able to support this? The funding, as I was just mentioning, is this going to be 24/7, 365? Or are you going to do it more on a best effort basis? What do your clients expect? What are you able to offer your clients in this respect? And for a smaller bank, this might be really challenging, because most of the time you see that there's not enough people to do this in a weekend, unless you hire a whole bunch of new people to support this. So for a smaller bank, best effort availability seems more realistic. So then there's also a question on the routing and the validations, because they need to be instant or near instant. And what is the moment that you're going to do your validation? When is the timer going to start to initiate the instant payments to ensure you can make the timelines of the relevant scheme? So that is something you have to take a close look at when looking at the value chain of which you route and validate your payments. But another very challenging thing is your current fraud and sanction screening system, because most of the fraud, the older fraud and sanction screening system are based on a batch-based process. And that's obviously not realistic when you're talking about a real-time online payments infrastructure. So you need to have a close look at how are you going to support that to deal with the suspensions during evenings and also in weekends. So both the system, but also the support surrounding fraud and sanction screening. But I think the biggest challenge is in your back office. So your legacy systems, can they deal with the speed and the real-time needs to support the instant payment solution? There's a huge demand. So speed, real-time on the bank's platform, high availability, high uptime environment, no planned downtime in principle, high performance necessity. Can a bank support it by themselves, or do you need another party to support you with that? There are quite a number of parties in the markets which offer solutions in this area, like Econs Worldline, Equinix, Pelican, and obviously also Sopra Banking can do that for you. To summarize, so real-time fast payments, the payment landscape is changes to a more efficient digital one and provides the roadmap to a new business model. It becomes the new normal, and therefore it cannot be ignored. So it is a dissatisfier of customers of you don't have it. Last but not least, instant payments nearly the cashless cash, but requires the necessary investment and choices of financial institutions to get there. So I now hand over to Patrick, who will tell you more about instant payments and Sopra Banking.
So thank you, Christine. We can go to the next slide. So the question is, how can Dutch banks instant payments realize instant payments and get it working? So as Christine told, it's quite complex to do this and also requires investments and has a huge impact on the back office. So if you want to provide instant payments as a Dutch bank to your customers in a cost-effective way and with a low project risk, you can use, of course, the SOPA banking payment solution. Our aim was to reduce the complexity and also the costs. So being able to do so, we looked at several elements, which you can see on the slide. One is, of course, the solution should be proven. You should not be concerned as a bank about implementation risk or about the scalability of a solution. Also, the solution should be compliant and keep it up to being compliant with all the payment regulations and especially the European Payment Council. The question is about back office agnostic. Of course, the payment engine of SOPA banking can connect to the back office of SOPA banking. But what about other back offices? We believe that it should be back office agnostic. When you open your bank, so when you are reachable for instant payments, this will have an impact on all your back office systems. For example, if you offer a savings account and a corporate account, then both will be reachable for instant payments. So our solution should be able to deal with connectivity to both backends and not only to a SOPA banking backend. It should also be multi-CSM. Christine talked about your choice of CSM. So you should be able with this solution to connect to different CSM and not be stuck with one CSM and only connect to for example, Equens. It will also help you to be 24/7, which is often a struggle for banks, being 24/7 operational, but also now no planned downtime is important. So that's why we created a turnkey solution, which is with competitive pricing and a short implementation time. So on the next slide, a little bit more detail about the solution we can provide to you. The SOPA instant payment solution is fully SaaS-based. So this means that it's really provided as a service to you. We call this IPCE, and the IPCE stands for Instant Payments Clearing Exchange. It will manage the instant payments created in the different core banking payment engines and routed to the different CSMs. For example, it will include the bank connectivity. So IPCE will connect to your back office. It will monitor everything in real time. So all the performances, and also monitor with the timeout manager the 5-second limits, which is applicable in the Netherlands. It will be, of course, high available and without downtime and scalable. Christine also talked about reconciliations and matching files and so on. This is of course included, and will also maintain a table which banks are reachable for instant payments and not, and then deal with this without hassle. If you look at connectivity, of course, connectivity is important to the CSMs. It should be secure. You should have multiple lines, lease lines, production lines, different environments. This is all taken care of in the solution. It will also connect to different CSMs, so you have a choice of CSM. You can go to Equens, you can go to STED in France and Belgium, but also RT1. And next year we will also add tips. So this is important for you to differentiate or choose the best effective and cost-effective way. This total solution is mutualized. This means that several banks can use this and we manage this fully for you. So it's really a turnkey solution, and we call it also a no-hassle solution. So on the next slides, I will explain a little bit more about the experience we have, and then also provide more details about the mutualization and the cost reductions. So in brief, our experience in France. Today, there are 9 payment service providers in France, and they are live since November 2018. For 5 banks in France, we provide instant payments using our IPCE solution, which is the basis. We also provide it in the Netherlands. You're probably surprised about the volumes in France because they are quite low compared to the Netherlands. It's only 36,000 transactions per day. This is mainly due to the approach in France where the main ambition was to be reachable for instant payments. And also clients still have to pay for making the payment instant instead of the regular SCTs. So on the next slide, the references are in Belgium. In Belgium, it was a totally different case. Several smaller banks, so the non-tier 1 banks, they struggled with the question, how do I implement instant payments and offer instant payments to my clients without having the high investments and also dealing or struggling with the 24/7 support. This is quite new to smaller banks to also work in the weekend and having everything fault tolerant and scalable. So the first 3 banks worked together with Sopra, where we created instant payments, so IPCE, in a mutualized way, so sharing cost and reducing cost per bank. And this worked out quite well, and now 5 banks are using this solution. In Belgium, the instant payment volumes are a little bit higher, so around 300,000 transactions or messages per day, and Sopra Banking is processing 15% of the total volumes in Belgium. So on the next slide, a brief summary about the being proven question with respect to IPCE. So currently 11 banks are using the IP solution of Sopra Banking in 3 countries, so including the Netherlands. The CSM, just to explain, Equens is included in this one, and Centric is running IPCE live at the moment, processing IPCE instant payment transactions in the Netherlands using Equens. So in the next slide, it's more explanation about the shared cost and multi-CSMs. And on the right side, you see the CSM. So you really have the connectivity to different CSMs, allowing you to choose the CSM. And in the middle, we have a multi-licensed infrastructure. This means that the infrastructure is shared amongst different banks or different clients. For example, STAT requires dedicated hardware, and this is shared amongst clients because it has a high cost, so this will reduce cost. Also, connectivity requires different production lines and backup lines and test lines, different environments. This is all handled and shared amongst clients, again, reducing the cost. And on the left side, you see that different banks will, of course, connect to our IPCE solution. This means that your core banking solution payment engine will send messages over a dedicated line or over the internet to the IPCE solution. For example, it can save a lot of cost if you are a savings bank in the Netherlands and active in Belgium or in Germany, and you have a single instance. You only need to connect once to IPCE, and then IPCE will take care of the routing, so it will route for the Belgian payments to STAT and for the Dutch payments to Equens. So this is saving, again, lots of costs for this bank, because you don't have to connect to Equens and STAT and have everything double or even triple if you are active in 3 countries or more. So the goal is to save 40 or a maximum 50% of the costs. So on the next slide, we look at the benefits for you as a bank. One of the questions is often, okay, concern compliancy. In this solution, we take care of the compliancy. So the bank should not be concerned about being compliant and being compliant in the future. If there are changes from the European Payments Council, then we will take care of this in the solution. And of course, there's the cost reduction I explained about mutualization, but it is also including ongoing investments you normally have to take to be up to date with the latest technologies, and also the maintenance of this application is included in our offering. So you're really benefiting from this in this setup. And also the infrastructure is fully managed by you, 24/7 for you. So there's no concern that you have to be up and running and active during the weekends or during the nights. This is taken care of, so this is really no hassle solution for you. And this allows the banks to really focus on what you need to be and how you can differentiate on different things like the front end or your products, and you need less resources to support instant payments in the end. So really a turnkey solution for banks in the Netherlands that want to offer instant payments. So for next slides, I will hand over to Roderick. He will talk a little bit more about instant payments and also about the banking applications.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Christine. So if you look at the instant payments, we've learned a lot. It has impact on your entire value chain, from the channel up to your back office and your CSM connections. But we realize there's much more going on within each bank. So instant is one element. And even apart from instant payments, there's instant reporting, especially on the wholesale banking side. Wholesale clients do require more than only 5 times a week a report. So that's moving towards instant reporting as well. But on the other hand, banks are fully busy with their digitalization programs, data as the new source of income. So instant need to fit into that picture as well. And we're busy with online mobile onboarding. We're busy with self-service, to give the clients much more self-service capability in the channels. And we see a lot of developments on the technology side, where in the past on-premise solutions seemed like a good idea. Nowadays, everybody's actually moving to the cloud, to the private or even the public cloud. And somehow instant payments need to fit into that change calendar. And it's not only that, of course, the open banking keeps us busy as well. On one hand, compliancy, if you're a payment institution, you need to at least be reachable for via APIs for payment requests and to provide account information. But we already see the discussion that's much more towards open banking. You should move beyond compliance, and you should have a strategy and a vision on open banking. And open banking is having impact as well on the same components that you will impact with instant payments. So if you look at the next sheet, there's a quite complex picture of how these 3 developments will impact your value chain. I will not go through all the bullets, don't worry. But what you see is that from an instant payment perspective, the green bullets, it's from channel up to, say, your account management, your payment processing engines, as well as your route towards the clearing that you need to revisit. For digitalization, the same thing. It's impacting your channels, it's impacting your core banking systems, it's impacting the partners with whom do you do business, it's impacting your strategy on data. And the same can be said about open banking, where you need to provide APIs, some from a compliance perspective, others because there's a sound business model linked to it. And you need to give access to the outside world, to your infrastructure. So if you add the 3 different developments together, it's all about, okay, what's next? How do I start knowing that instant payments is in the market and the other topics are as well on my agenda? So on the next page, a little piece of advice from our end. So the first question you have to raise and to answer yourself is whether you consider instant payments as a standalone topic, or whether you want to link it to your roadmap, which basically combines everything that's going on internally, but as well as anticipates on the changes that are coming towards you from the marketplace. So you have to understand what it means. And if you decide that it's not only instant, but you want to have a roadmap towards everything, you need to inventorize all the changes, as well as look at your own internal agenda with regards to cloud, with regards to legacy replacements. If you open up your chain, for instance, you might want to do it first time right and make it future-proof for all the developments that are coming towards you. So you have to think about your sourcing strategy and your target operating model. And something I've been doing the last 2 years is try to fit that into a bank as a service solution offering from parties in the market. And it's kind of a buzzword. And if you look at the right side of this picture, you'll see all kind of logical components that you need to fit into that sourcing strategy and decision. And I can tell you that there are a lot of service providers like Fidor, Solaris, Starling Bank, Mambu, that all tell you they have a bank as a service, but you really need to look at exactly what they're offering to understand whether it fits your ambition and your target operating model. And some offer only payment engine as a service. Some do include the accounts, but not the channel. Some do not solve your BPO, your 24/7 challenge, like Christine was mentioning. And so it's up to you to detail what you are looking for and try to match that with the right solution partners in the marketplace. And that might sometimes mean that you will end up at more than one party, but there are plenty of parties that can help you with more than only instant payments. But you need to decide your approach. And that's, I think, the first question that you need to answer. Do you see it as an isolated topic, or is it part of the bigger picture? So that's what I wanted to share.
Well, great. Thank you so much for that, Roderick. And of course, thank you, Christine and Patrick as well. Meanwhile, we've had plenty of questions, which we'll dive straight into after looking at the three main takeaways we can glean from that presentation. First of all, implement instant payments and meet the expectations of your client. Instant payments will soon become the new normal, and plenty of banks will have to follow suit. Second, you have to make the right decisions. Implementations can be complex with architecture and legacy in mind. So choose the right partners for every step of your journey. Costs are important, especially these days. Mutualization of software and joint cost coverage can be a huge step forward. And on that note, we're now going to answer some of the questions you've been asking. I think this is probably quite a good one for you, Patrick, if that's okay. I have a question that says, what is the implementation time? Patrick, is that okay for you to take that one?
Yeah, sure, that's okay. So the implementation time is depending on the main connectivity between the bank and the IPCE solution. You can imagine that the rest is turnkey. So IPCE towards the CSMs is already in place. So the main effort of the implementation is with respect to arranging the connectivity between the bank and IPCE, and also testing the interfacing. So this will be around 3 months for the implementation time.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We have another question here that I think might be good for Laurent. Laurent, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. So we have a question that was asked during the presentation. It goes, I thought that a direct payment is done directly after positive authorization of the payment. Now I hear that depending on the priority of the transaction, it can take up to 72 hours. I do not understand that. How do you feel about that, Laurent?
Yeah, it's a good question for a Belgian guy to answer to a specificity of the Netherlands. So you have to know that in the Netherlands, authorities and banks decided to replace SCT by SCT instead because it's a new norm. I think it's the right way of doing. So to reach these goals, they decided to create a 2-speed in instant payment. So instant payment critical with a timeout of 7 seconds. And instant payment not time critical with 72 hours to replace SCT. So it's very interesting. So because depending of priority, you can have instant payment like Europe decided, or a replacement of SCT. So it's interesting. Why it's very interesting? Because other countries that have started instant payment, in Belgium, for example, and in France, after starting instant payment, they are looking how they can replace SEPA credit transfer with instant payment, and they're looking, they're watching the Dutch market about that, because you have a solution on your market.
If it's okay, can I add to that? Because the 72 hours is, what you see is that most of the instant payments are processed, let's say 97.5% is processed within 5 seconds. And that's even the not time critical ones. The not time critical was more created that suppose that the bank is not available for a few seconds, that those payments are not directly all rejected. And that's why it was created at the time. So at the moment, it's quite some banks still offer it as a let be on the safe side because they didn't know how it would process with instant payments. But the expectation is that in the end, the not time critical will disappear because the time critical is if everybody feels secure about it, that it can support all the timelines which we need to follow.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Laurent, as well. Christine, I think this is a pretty good question for you. Where is the business case for banks?
Yeah, good. Sorry, put on my video. Good question. Yeah, in fact, there is not a real business case. We should consider that instant payments is really the new normal. And from a defensive strategy perspective, not moving to instant payments is not an option. You will probably at least disappoint your customers or even lose them. So looking back at the why, there are several demands in the market which you could facilitate, as I just pointed out. It is in the end something you have to offer, as that's what the market expects. And you can't ignore it and need to deal with it. But you could also see it as an opportunity to invest in your back office or your mid office and do a real modernization of your systems and operations so that you're ready for the digital and real-time world. So we're moving towards it. It also provides opportunities for new business models, which you as a bank can announce your offering to your private and your business customers.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think we have time to answer just one more of the questions that's been asked. Laurent, I'd like to ask you this one. What is the average execution time of instant payments in other countries?
So yeah, it's a question about time. So in fact, when we start the project with different banks 3 years ago about instant payment, banks say yes, 10 seconds it will be complicated to reach. But now, after 1 year, for example, we see that most banks answer on the critical path of instant payments, so beneficiary bank. Around 400 milliseconds to all payments. So it's an average. For example, in Belgium and in France, it takes only 400 milliseconds to answer to an instant payment.
Okay, fantastic. Well, unfortunately, I do think that's all we have time for. But I would love to thank everyone for tuning in, and thank you to our speakers as well. Be sure to follow us on social media or at soprabanking.com to stay up to date with all the latest news in instant payments and much more. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.